Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for our monthly Berkshire Green Drinks event. We're excited to get started with tonight's presentation, which is an update from all of us here at Berkshire Environmental Action Team. I'm Chelsea, Beats Programs Director. I'm assuming most, if not all of you already know about BEAT, but if you don't know about us, well, you're about to learn a lot. Yeah, so if you don't get your fill by the end of the hour, you can always visit our website, thebeatnews.org, to learn more and also just stay connected going forward. Next slide. And then also just a reminder to everyone that our website is this community resource where you can easily find upcoming environmental events, recent environmental job postings, public meetings, and projects that are taking place in Western Massachusetts and occasionally statewide and regionally as well. We also have a bi-weekly newsletter, the Beat News, that contains all of this information in a concise email, which Andrew puts together, and you can sign up for that. It's free. You can go through our website if you'd like to receive those emails. Next slide. And if you're interested in supporting the work Beat does, including free educational programs like this one, Berkshire Green Drinks, there are many ways to do so, and you can learn more about those through the donate page on our website. Next slide. And so the next few months of Berkshire Green Drinks will cover some really interesting topics. We'll be back to our usual hybrid format in January with Mass Wildlife Biologist Nate Buckhout. Some of you may remember Nate from his Green Drinks presentation on mustelids, the weasel family. So he's going to join us again at the Stationery Factory in Dalton on January 8th to tell us all about black bears and just how to prevent conflict with them. And then on February 12th, Shelby Perry of the Northeast Wilderness Trust is going to join us virtually to talk about slime molds, which actually are not a mold or fungus at all, but are more similar to amoebas. And then in March, Jessica Duffy will talk about two rare butterflies in Berkshire County and how volunteers can help survey their populations. And that gathering will be hybrid, but we're still trying to figure out the in-person location. And you can find out more details and register for those events through our website. So yeah, that's all I have, and I'm going to pass it off to Brittany.
Thanks, Chelsea. Hello, everyone. My name is Brittany Ebling. I'm the Deputy Director here at BEAT, and so I work across the organization supporting our various programs within education and outreach, watchdogging, and stewardship. So I'm just going to touch on a few initiatives and programs that I was involved in this year. And this year, BEAT continued and deepened its work addressing pollinators, native species, and building our community capacity to respond to environmental threats of all kinds. This summer, as shown in this picture here, we enjoyed our annual native plant giveaway from the Rain Garden, located just outside of our Environmental Leadership and Education Center. And if you haven't visited us here, I would encourage you to do so, though it's a little less verdant these days. And so at this event, visitors like those shown here took home all kinds of native plants from our rain garden, Joe Pye weed, New England aster, goldenrod, and so many more. We'll be having this event again next year, and I hope you'll join us. Next slide, please. I see our board member, Terry Stifler, is here tonight. So a special thanks to BEAT board member Terry, who spearheaded an event this spring at the Berkshire Athenaeum in anticipation of No Mow May, where there's a whole movement to discourage people from mowing our lawns in order to encourage pollinator activity in our yards. So at this event, we showed a recording of a lecture by Doug Tallamy, who's introduced this notion of homegrown national park, which encourages the practice of integrating pollinator plants into private lands, including and especially in our home yards, not just in some far off place over there. And this is, of course, in place of maintaining pristine lawns, which are really like dead zones for the many pollinators that we need to support our complex and delicate ecosystems. And we were lucky to hear from Jim McGrath of the city of Pittsfield about the city's efforts to introduce native plants into the urban landscape. And we also listened to environmental science professor and BEAT board member Bruce Wynn describing transformations that are going to take place at Berkshire Community College to support pollinators through native plantings and lots of other exciting improvements to their many, many acres of land. So BEAT is also very vocal about the detrimental effects of pesticides that pesticides have on pollinators and reverberating effects on the broader environment, including for soil health and river ecosystems. So this year we participated in presentations and panel discussions at the Rooted in Place Symposium at the Berkshire Botanical Garden and at the Triplex Environmental Film Festival, in addition to submitting numerous public comments and signing on to legislative pushes for the regulation of toxic pesticides, like neonicotinoids, for example, which are referred to as neonics for short. And these pesticides are notoriously lethal to pollinators. Last year, New York State became the first state in the country to ban these pesticides, and Vermont was not far behind. So we're in a particularly exciting moment to be pushing the state of Massachusetts to follow suit. Next slide, please. Another form of pollution that we're addressing, because BEAT works on addressing pollution of many kinds, is related to a campaign we've started this year to stop a particularly harmful practice in the state of Massachusetts, which is the practice of filling our rivers and streams with non-native fish. Each year, the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, which is also known as Mass Wildlife, pours a significant portion of its budget into its fish stocking program, in which it raises and releases thousands of non-native fish in some water bodies up to 7 times a year into our state's water bodies. So by the department's own admission, nearly all of these fish die, releasing nutrients into our river systems, a practice that BEAT views as pollution. Some of these fish, of course, do survive and become established in areas where they are not native, having reverberating consequences for the broader ecosystems. The practice of stocking has been largely curtailed in states like California because of the harms that the practice can cause to endangered species, macroinvertebrates, and other creatures. And I think that it's of particular note that Governor Maura Healey this year introduced a biodiversity mandate for government agencies in Massachusetts. And so in alignment with that mandate, we are asking the state to drop this practice, which we feel undermines our state's rich watershed biodiversity. Lastly, I'd like to highlight an event which illustrates BEAT's method and ethos for working in community throughout the Berkshires. Our approach is to work alongside community members to build our collective capacity in responding to environmental challenges when we see them. Because in all of our work, we believe that an educated and engaged public is the environment's best defense. So in August, we held a grassroots environmental action workshop. I know a number of folks participating tonight were there in person, and it was such a wonderful, engaging day where participants learned the basics of engaging with government on local, state, and federal levels through public comment periods, petitions, campaigns.
Go downstairs to get something?
Yeah.
No,
Could you bring up a nice
elected officials, community organizing, and more. So we look forward to more events of that sort. And I'm going to pass it back to Chelsea for more on education and outreach.
Thanks, Brittany. So yeah, as I mentioned at the start, my name is Chelsea Simmons and I'm BEAT's Programs Director. And tonight I'm just going to go over some of the events and programs be organized during 2024 and some that we plan to offer in 2025. And then I'll briefly touch on our volunteer opportunities and how people can get involved in some of the environmental stewardship work that BEAT does. Next slide. So BEAT organizes many events and programs throughout the year, and each have a foundation of science and education. And we aim to make these as accessible as possible because our goal is to help build and support a community of environmentally minded people who are informed on environmental issues and also care about the natural world, which is why most of the programs, events, and educational materials BEAT offers are free and open to all. However, that's also only possible because of generous donations and grants and those who support BEAT by leading workshops and walks or giving presentations all free of charge so that more people can enjoy them and learn. And for any of our programs that are not free, which very rarely happens, BEAT also offers a 50 to 100% discount based on financial need. Next slide. This was BEAT's 6th year offering the Kids in Kayaks program at the annual West Side Block Party, which takes place at the Riverway Park in Pittsfield. And this program gives kids an opportunity to learn how to safely navigate the river and also experience using a kayak on their own. And it's also a way for them to connect with the environment and this amazing natural resource that's basically right in their backyards. And this year we were able to offer Kids in Kayaks to over a dozen families. Next slide. So some of you may remember that in 2023, we started removing the invasive species from the riverbank behind BEAT's Environmental Leadership and Education Center. And we also started implementing methods for erosion control. And this past spring, Ward's Nursery in Great Barrington generously donated 60 native trees and shrubs to BEAT, and with the help of volunteers and over a couple of days, we were able to get those planted on the riverbank. And this is also just an ongoing ecological restoration project of BEAT's, and it's going to take continued monitoring and a lot of watering and just removing of invasives. So we may call on volunteers again next spring or summer to help us continue this work. And then we organized the 15th Berkshire Biodiversity Day, also known as Berkshire BioBlitz, which is just an event where scientists, naturalists, and community members come together to try and identify as many living organisms as possible in a specific designated area during a short amount of time. So Berkshire Biodiversity Day is technically a 24-hour biological survey. And this year, Berkshire Community College hosted the event, and we surveyed its campus in Pittsfield, which is over 180 acres with a wide range of habitats. And overall, the program was a great success. We had about 100 people participate, including 18 scientists from kind of all over, at least in the Northeast, and there was never really a dull moment. The program was filled with guided walks, presentations, and also demonstrations led by experts. And collectively, we observed 503 species on BCC's campus within the 24 hours, which notably included an eastern whippoorwill that was heard during the owl prowl, and an American snout butterfly, which is pictured here on this slide. And that's a rare species to find in Berkshire County. Next slide. And then this year, BEAT continued our work to help improve wildlife connectivity. We organized an online community training and an online info session with Scott Jackson, a UMass Extension professor who developed the protocols of the North Atlantic Aquatic Connectivity Collaborative, which BEAT refers to as NAC. And these protocols focus on surveying culverts and road stream crossings to improve wildlife's ability to move freely throughout their habitat. We also hosted field training sessions, which gave others the opportunity to become certified in the NAC non-tidal aquatic connectivity protocol, so that they could then conduct surveys and collect data in the areas they live and work. And then in addition to that, just trying to get more people out and collecting important data, Beat surveyed over 50 culverts in Hancock because they had not yet been assessed and added to the NAC database. And we also surveyed about 40 crossings in Savoy. And our efforts gained notable recognition, including coverage on the front page of the Sunday Boston Globe in July. Next slide. And in October, Beat also hosted a professional level wildlife tracking and ecology certification and training in October Mountain State Forest, where participants had the opportunity to get their level 1 certification through CyberTracker North America. This was led by Daniel Hanshey, and we had a full group of 14 participants, many of whom work in the environmental field. Next slide. Jessica Duffy, who I think might be in this meeting, one of Beat's volunteers, is beginning a research project on 2 rare butterflies with populations in the Berkshires, the veined white and the West Virginia white. During the early spring of 2025, Beat will be asking volunteers to join Jessica in surveying an access road on October Mountain. And there's also evidence that these butterflies may be laying eggs on invasive garlic mustard. So those kind of act as an egg sink, and they hinder the larva's ability to develop compared to if they were laying their eggs on their native plant hosts. So Beat will also start organizing volunteer garlic mustard pools in the spring. And we just want to see if there are changes in the butterfly populations from year to year as we bring down the garlic mustard concentrations from pooling during the spring. And as I mentioned earlier, Jessica is going to present at the March Berkshire Green Drinks, so definitely join us if you're interested in learning more about this research and just how you might be able to help. Next slide. Earlier this year, Beat was awarded a grant from the Woodlands Partnership of Northwest Massachusetts. And as a recipient of this grant, Beat will host several tree identification walks, free and open to the public throughout the Woodlands Partnership region during the first half of 2025. We will also produce and distribute a few new Tree of the Month illustrations, and we're going to create a Tree of the Month calendar for 2026. And then in spring, we will host an estate planning workshop where participants will have the opportunity to learn information needed to make informed decisions about the future of their land. Next slide. So very quickly, I'm going to go through some of the volunteer opportunities that Beat offers annually and even weekly, like this one, cutting and pulling invasive hardy kiwi in Burbank Park. Beat began this work about a decade ago, and we don't use chemicals, but instead go out every Friday at 10 a.m. To cut and pull this non-native plant that is really quite harmful to the ecology of Burbank Park and the surrounding areas. Next slide. And then this volunteer opportunity is entirely weather dependent and only takes place on the first few warm, rainy nights of spring when the conditions are just right for amphibian migration. During this annual migration, many amphibians have to cross roads to get to their spring breeding grounds, which is why one of the biggest threats that they face when migrating is getting ran over by cars. So we go out to multiple areas in Berkshire County that we've identified as amphibian crossings, and we help salamanders and frogs migrate across roads during these migration nights, which are commonly referred to as big nights. On this slide, you can see how many amphibians our volunteers helped during our spring migration of this year. And also, just to put this out there, if you know of any areas in Berkshire County where amphibians are crossing roads in large numbers on these big nights, we would really love to know about them. Next slide. This summer, Beat and Housatonic Valley Association organized our 3 annual Housatonic River cleanups. We were only able to carry out 2 cleanups due to rain, but we still pulled out a lot of trash. We removed 15 shopping carts that were submerged in the river, 5 bikes, 16 contractor bags of random trash, hundreds of plastic glass bottles, 12 tires, several phones, textiles of all kinds, and then some. But of course, we were only able to do that because of the wonderful volunteers who came out and spent half their Saturday in waders hauling things out of the river. And these last few slides show just a few of the volunteer opportunities BEAT offers. If you're interested in volunteering with us, you should definitely check out the volunteer page on BEAT's website. Also at the bottom of that page, you can sign up to receive emails concerning specific opportunities. So yeah, that concludes everything I wanted to share this evening. Thanks for listening, and I'll hand it over to Rose.
Hi, folks. I'm Rose. I'm the program director for No Frack Gas in Mass, which is a program of BEAT. If folks remember, it's almost 11 years ago now that we started No Frack Gas in Mass, when there were a lot of pipeline proposals through the region. And we defeated the big one, the Ned pipeline. And since then, we've continued to fight new pipelines and starting to take on existing fossil fuel infrastructure, while also advocating for green energy solutions, energy efficiency, and environmental justice. Next slide. One of the big fights that's coming up is Project Maple. This is a proposal by Enbridge to expand their existing Algonquin gas transmission pipeline system. The trick is they put out a call for bids, but they haven't filed this project yet. So right now, it's not something that we can fight like we did with the Ned, where we all got onto the FERC docket. But what they've done in the meantime is file little pieces of what should be Project Maple, not under that name, with FERC. So we've been doing a lot of educational webinars, technical assistance on permitting procedures, drafting regulatory protests to the sneaky way that they're getting little pieces of this pipeline through, and organizing guidance for the multi-state effort. And we also created and co-maintain a website. More information on this is at stopprojectmaple.org. Another thing we're keeping an eye on is a possible infrastructure project from the Federal Department of Energy. So yeah, we fight fossil fuel, but we also want to make sure that the good stuff gets built correctly. This proposal is pretty invasive. It would put high electric transmission corridors to help boost electrification that's going to be needed as more renewable energy comes online. But it could open up a mile-wide corridor across Western Massachusetts by eminent domain. If folks are familiar with the power lines for Eversource, that was also where the Ned pipeline was proposed. It's the same path that they're looking at, only a mile wide, would have devastating impacts. So we met with Department of Energy officials and gave them stakeholder information because they didn't really get a broad outreach to the towns that this would impact. We also shared the information with those elected officials in those towns and commented on the docket with Department of Energy on less impactful methods for boosting capacity. We know that electric transmission capacity does have to go up, but it doesn't need to be impactful. They didn't look at any of the efficiency methods and other ways of doing this within the existing corridor. We have more information for that at NIETC info. That's National Interest Electric Transmission Corridor. And the other thing that we've been taking on is peaking power plants. These are the power plants that come on when the grid is completely maxed out and they need more power. So they fire up the oldest, least efficient, and most polluting electric generation plants that we have. We've been talking with the folks at Pittsfield Generating. We're still talking with them, but we're trying to get them to get off of fossil fuels and go with battery storage and solar. Peaking power plants, because they're only needed for a few hours a day, can be replaced with battery storage like that. Next slide. The other plant owner that we talked to was Cogentrix. They own the Doreen Street plant in Pittsfield, and the woodland plant right across from October State Mountain State Park. They, when we approached them, they said, you know what, you're right, we should be decarbonizing. Let's see what we can do. And they've closed both the Doreen plant and the woodland plant and removed them. They are completely gone from those sites. And it turns out they also own the large peaker plant in West Springfield. This was one of the most polluting in the state, and it's now being planned to convert over to battery storage and renewables. And they stopped burning fossil fuels already 2 years ago. Next slide, please. So with those successes, we teamed up with some other groups across the state. And actually one is out of state. They work nationwide, but they're very informative. Clean Energy Group, and then Slingshot and Mass Climate Action Network. And we've formed the Mass Peak Coalition, and we're taking on all the peakers statewide, which is about 30 power plants altogether. Our criteria for choosing which ones to address next are the ones that pollute the most and have the highest amount of environmental justice population around them. And in a really interesting twist of fate, the new State Office of Energy Transformation met with environmental groups before they started up. And when they talked to us, we mentioned peakers, and they're like, oh, that's interesting. And turns out it's one of the three planks in their platform, and they are now looking at it as a statewide initiative to see if they can be decarbonized. So things are moving forward on that front as well. So the work we do is a lot of gathering of information and disseminating it among other groups and educating the public on not only what's going on, but what they can do about it. We spur a lot of grassroots campaigns and help them network with already existing organizations. We provide templates for opposition that can be helping them set up petitions, helping them draft petitions, helping them understand where the power is that they need to push back against. We also share strategies and knowledge among different organizations to facilitate more informed decision-making by everybody. And the other thing we do is plug people into regulatory and legislative comment periods. Since several climate laws were passed in the last several years, there are a lot of meetings, comment periods to make the regulations that meet the goals of those laws. And this is really a chance for the public to chime in on what they want. And you can find all that information on nofracgasandmass.com. And I'll turn it over to John.
Okay. Hi, I'm John Prusensky. I'm coming up on my second anniversary as a project assistant for No Frack Gas and Mass. As Rose said, the program of BEAT. This has been a busy year for me. Spent lots of time attending legislative hearings and technical webinars about energy technology, writing comments from BEAT on proposed new state energy regulations, and participating in meetings for the various environmental coalitions in which we are a part. My other responsibilities include general tech support, including building and maintaining our websites. When I came on board a couple of years ago, one of the first things I did was to create a new website for No Frack Gas and Mass, importing the reams of content that Rose had amassed on the website over the years. We're still adding more content to the website every day, including environmental news, listings of upcoming legislative hearings, dates and information about comment periods, as Rose just mentioned, on pending legislation and regulations, and upcoming events of interest. This year, I built and now maintain 2 new websites for other projects and coalitions we're involved with. Thanks to the Mass Clean Peak website, which is what Rose was just talking about, working toward community-led transitions of peaker plants to 100% clean and renewable energy, while protecting the health of those most impacted by the health, economic, and racial injustices of fossil fuel infrastructure. And the other one was the Stop Project Maple website, which is, of course, as Rose said, a place for all the multi-state coalition of activist groups to share information about what's going on with the project. We built it so that each state has its own page in which members of those coalitions from those states can keep track of what's going on in their state. And people from other states, of course, can go look and see what's going on in Connecticut, for instance. And on our in the resources section, there's also we post the weekly bulletins that FERC sends out on the project progress of the project. So the other thing I wanted to focus on today is a project that I actually quite enjoy doing. It's a monthly environmental news email newsletter that I write and put together every month. Since it only comes out once a month, it's an easy way to stay informed on some key issues without having your email inbox getting swamped by yet more email. This is what it looks like. As you can see, this month I wrote about geothermal energy, industrial scale geothermal energy, and the positive aspects of that, and also the problems with it. It's very expensive and location specific in general. Although there are some new technologies coming out that may make it more possible to use in places that previously would have been not particularly useful for geothermal, industrial scale geothermal. So here's a couple of other examples of things that I wrote about. The August issue covered the surprising fact that, oh, sorry, I forgot to mention that at the bottom of each newsletter, there are usually about 6 stories that I pick out from the news that came out that month. Things that may not have been covered as well in the mainstream news, but if you're interested in this kind of stuff, it's a good place to find things that seem pretty significant in terms of environmental actions. So yes, in August, I covered the surprising fact to me that although most methane emissions are the result of industrial and other anthropogenic sources, almost half of the global methane emissions are from natural sources, primarily from wetlands. Wetlands are natural carbon sinks, but they also release methane, mainly from rotting vegetation. And the rise in global temperatures and disruption in rainfall patterns due to climate change are causing wetlands to release methane far more rapidly than historical norms. That puts the pressure on us, as if we didn't have enough, to really make sure to shut down anthropogenic methane releases, because there's a big chunk of it coming out that we really have no control over. So we should do the part that we can control. That's called the methane feedback loop. June, I wrote about the interconnection queue, which those of you who follow the grid know that has been a major roadblock to getting more renewable energy on the grid, because getting connected to the grid is a very long and difficult process as it currently runs. Sometimes takes years between the time that the energy is ready to deliver and it can actually flow onto the grid. And want to go one more? Yes, exactly. So the previous one was an article about GET, which is an acronym for Grid Enhanced Technologies, a set of technologies that enable the grid to transmit more electricity over existing infrastructure. There's a whole ream of ways that can be done, but it's very important for issues like what Rose was talking about with the NITSE corridor. Rather than building more and bigger transmission lines, there are ways to make the existing transmission lines carry a lot more energy. And we would really like to pressure FERC and Eversource to choose that method first before they start talking about cutting down a mile-wide corridor. I think that may be it for me. Yes, it is. So I will pass it off to Andrew.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew, and I'm one of the co-managers for the Breathe Easy Berkshires project, which focuses on community air quality monitoring here in Pittsfield. And I'm really excited tonight to welcome and introduce to all of you our newest member of the BEAT team and my fellow co-manager, Drake.
What's going on, everybody? It's nice to meet you. Before we get started on giving little bit of an update on the project Andrew's going to go through. Just want to introduce myself as the other co-manager for the air quality project. My role is going to be mostly focusing on the public health and community engagement piece to the project. And just a little bit of backstory about me. I'm a geographer, I'm an artist, and interdisciplinary artist, environmental and social justice advocate. A lot of my personal work investigates oppressive architecture as well as participatory art practices. And a lot of my recent work before I came to BEAT was looking at the New York City Mayor's Office Environmental Justice projects and helping them with a lot of their environmental justice scientific reporting. So yeah, I'm going to give a little bit of an update on where we are in the project, but I'll pass it to Andrew for now to give a little bit of the scientific kind of analysis of the introduction to Breathe Easy before we talk about what's next for our project.
Next slide, please. So our project is focused on monitoring two different types of air pollutants here in Pittsfield. The first is nitrogen dioxide, which is emitted primarily from the burning of fossil fuels. So as Rose talked about and mentioned peaker plants earlier, that's definitely one source of nitrogen dioxide. The other is really heavy traffic. So from all of our cars, buses, and trucks, and also looking at construction projects and the heavy equipment used in construction as another source, potential source of nitrogen dioxide here in Pittsfield. Next slide. The next pollutant, or the other pollutant that we're looking at is particulate matter, and we're looking at two different sizes of particulate matter, 2.5 and 10, and that is 2.5 microns and 10 microns. So this graphic here on the side, which is from the EPA, shows the kind of relative sizes of the 2.5, which are those red circles, and the 10, which are the blue, in comparison to the width of an average human hair or a particle of beach sand. So really, really small. And the issue with these particles and particulate matter in general is the size and the fact that something of that such small size can get into the lungs really easily and can even be transported to other locations in the body through the bloodstream, for example. Next slide. So in monitoring these two different pollutants, we have both stationary monitors and mobile monitors. So our stationary monitors, one of the devices is pictured right here on the slide. They are self-contained units powered by solar panels. And we have set them up in 9 different locations throughout the city. And these run 24/7. They take a reading every 15 minutes and then transmit an hourly average. And you can see at any time the latest hourly reading by going to our website, breatheeasyberkshires.org. And you can see also the history of readings at each particular location that we're looking at. So pictured on the slide here is each of those locations, -1, which we just relocated from one area to another in Pittsfield. And also you can see that at the time of this screenshot being taken and generally for the history of the project so far, our air quality in Pittsfield has been pretty good in that green range. Next slide. So in addition to the stationary monitoring, we also have mobile monitoring. So we have a team of part-time staff that go out with handheld monitoring devices. These are measuring, again, the nitrogen dioxide and the particulate at 2 different sizes. And we have different routes set up throughout Pittsfield. The mobile monitoring is really to give a picture of the kind of on-the-ground air and more specific to certain locations and certain areas of concern than the stationary monitors can really capture. So pictured here is a map that shows a few of our mobile monitoring routes, which are clustered around that little graphic in the center is to represent the peaking power plant that's right in the center of Pittsfield. And that's just one of the potential sources of pollution that we're looking at and hoping to gather data around. Next slide. So as I said, for the most part, so far, what we've seen is good air quality in Pittsfield. We've seen some spikes and some exceedances around different events. And the biggest event so far was several weeks ago with the Great Barrington wildfire. So this line graph here shows a timeline of all of the readings from our stationary monitors. This is the particulate 2.5 reading. And you can see they all hit a huge, huge spike on that Wednesday when the Butternut Fire smoke was spread north from Great Barrington and up and swept through Pittsfield. And you can see also on that map on the right, at the time of that spike, each of the stationary monitors were in the unhealthy for sensitive groups to just flat out unhealthy range. And this is the EPA's air quality index standards. And I'm going to hand it over to Drake to talk about some of the health implications and what you can do to protect yourself in bad air.
Yeah, next slide. Okay, so essentially, right, what can we do about a lot of these things, and what does my role mean now going forward, right? So a lot of what we're thinking about in the interim is just checking the Breathe Easy Berkshires.org, where you can check the air quality that we're recording and that we're also getting from the site and analyzing. And Andrew's doing a lot of that amazing work. And we're in the process now of thinking through a contact us page for this site so community members can give us their own kind of anecdotal or just things that they're seeing along the kind of the air quality project timeline. And you just want to get to know the comfort zones of the air quality index. A lot of the initial things and research that we saw and some of the indicators to look out for is just thinking about specifically with that Butternut wildfire, right? Like thinking about how you exercise outside and the time you take to be outside. Also thinking about when pollutions are high, just trying to think about an N95 mask and implementing more of people being aware of and having access to masks are things we're thinking about as we're thinking about developing the air quality Breathe Easy project. We're also recently, if you remember in the last slide, Andrew brought up the Butternut fire and the kind of peak and the harm in air quality. We're thinking about trying to do a discussion with the community and folks who were in the grant process initially to think about what that event means for the health of our community and trying to get a discussion around what the fire means for air quality and what the community essentially felt or what they saw in the different senses that came around the fire that happened last November. And also, the public health aspect of it and conducting all of that research is in the process now that I'm on board. So looking out for more of that initial kind of intermittent public health survey work that's going to be happening along this process, because a lot of what we're going to be doing is speaking with officials and our organizations and partners to try to get an understanding of what the community is feeling when it comes to or experiencing when it comes to air quality. So those are some of the what can you do's and like things to look out for in later in process of the project. And I don't know who to pass it off to next, but that is
Passing off to
the-
Jane,
to Jane. Okay.
our fearless leader.
Who's having trouble hitting unmute while still trying to share my screen. Sorry about that. I am so lucky to work with such an amazing group of people. They are the reason BEAT is able to accomplish so much, and I am so grateful to every one of them. And so thrilled to have Drake on board. He's only been with us for a little over a week, so awesome job. Another front that we've been working on is the Housatonic River, rest of river remediation. We're trying to keep up with the 9 different plans that GE has come out with right now. So these are all comment periods that are open. When they say rest of river, they're really saying from Fred Garner Park in Pittsfield, where the East and West Branch come together on Pomeroy Ave, all the way down through Pittsfield, Stockbridge, Lenox, down to Great Barrington to Rising Pond Dam. Now, rest of river really goes through Connecticut all the way to Long Island Sound. But the only thing GE is being forced to do in Connecticut is monitor. So there will be removal in Massachusetts. Right now, we are working on comments for the revised on-site, off-site transportation and disposal plan. While we may not be able to make big changes in the overall plan for remediation, we can change the way that it's happening by staying engaged and letting GE and EPA know what we want. We are really pleased that there is much more use of hydraulic dredging and rail in the current plan, transportation plan. People made their voices heard, and the plans really changed for the better. So if you're interested in commenting on that, the comment period is open until Wednesday, January 15th. For the length of the upcoming remediation, BEAT will be working with our many partners and the towns to try and improve stormwater. So everywhere where there's a storm drain in the streets and parking lots, those usually connect to pipes that go straight into the river. And this remediation is a huge opportunity to pull those pipes back and infiltrate that stormwater so it sinks into the ground in order to get to the river, making it clean and cold. It also means that the water doesn't end up all getting into the river at the same time and causing flooding. And in drought times, it means there's still groundwater slowly making its way to the river so that the river still has some flow. And this is really important for resilience given our changing climate. BEAT also wants to work on the transportation stream crossing. So everywhere where a road or rail crosses a stream or brook, we want anywhere where they're going to have to upgrade the roads and rail to make it so that they meet the Massachusetts river and stream crossing standards. In particular, where Millbrook crosses under Roaring Brook Road, which is this picture, we want to have that upgraded to a wide enough bridge for to keep it flowing all year long and let fish go up and down. We've seen brook trout get stuck downstream here. We also want, where there's a rail, we want to make sure that anywhere the rail is really close to the river, that they actually will upgrade those crossings as well. We haven't been working on a number of streams because you need to start sort of at the closest point to the river and work your way upstream, because if you're upstream and improve something, it can cause flooding downstream. So this is a huge opportunity to really get the culverts under the rail replaced. And I'm cheating, this picture is from quite a few years ago where a culvert washed out under the railroad tracks near Morewood Lake. So the other thing I want to talk about is our building. We're preparing to take the next big steps on our building. Just a very quick run through. We upgraded our horrendous electric system so that we now have good solid electric. We got rid of the old ballast lights that would smolder, creating a horrible smell, and installed LED lighting throughout the building. We added a new door to each office and added an accessible restroom in between so that we now have an accessible restroom on the street level. And we have a handmade towel rack to offer reusable hand towels or paper towels. But our paper towels are one of the ones that's highest rated by the Natural Resources Defense Council for using mostly post-consumer recycled paper. We also look for towels that paper products that don't come in plastic packaging. So sometimes we don't take the highest rated if it's going to be in plastic. Oops. We installed a water refill station. And in our exhibit hall, we took out the former stage and made an accessible balcony overlooking the southwest branch of the Housatonic River. And thanks to a generous grant from the Feigenbaum Foundation, we've been able to start adding to our exhibit hall, improving our stream crossing table, coming up with a really nice monitor for the Breathe Easy station for Drake and Andrew. Whoops. Well, we've added a wall-mounted projector, screen, and sound bar that have arrived but aren't quite up yet. We're adding microscopes and monitors to be able to see small things, but on a large screen, so we can all talk about them together. And we'll house the Hilltown Sustainability Library, thanks to Dan and Sergio for putting together all the shelves. Now we just need to get the books on them. For the next big steps, we're in our renovations. We're looking at the oldest part of the building. So this is a picture from back 1890. This is the exhibit hall that was the first piece of Beats Center that was built in 1868. And we have not been able to insulate this part of the building yet. So the plan is, to keep the same general character inside, because we really appreciate the church's entrusting this building to us and feel that this is really important. So we're looking at adding an exterior insulated roof on top of the building and doing an exterior wrap on that piece of the building. And then we'll add solar and battery storage and heat pumps so that we'll be able to get the building completely off of fossil fuels. And we received a $200,000 challenge grant from the Massachusetts Cultural Council, and we're pulling together other grant applications to help us meet the challenge. This is always a little tricky because the most important thing at the end of the year is to raise money to meet our operation budget, meaning being able to pay all our awesome staff. But if any of you happen to be in a position where you have extra money that you would like to contribute to our building as well, I would love to talk with you. So I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. And we would love to take your questions. I'm just going to stop sharing so that we can see everybody. And does anybody have any questions for us?
Feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand, your virtual hand. I know there have been several questions and smaller conversations going on in the chat throughout the presentation. Jane, I just have to say, I feel like I did not know about the smoldering, smelly lights.
I think that may have been before your time. It was really scary. We actually even had one of those old, huge old lights in our kitchen that fell down, but was caught by the counter and the sink. And none of it broke. It was amazing.
They were loud and buzzy too, and occasionally would crackle.
Yes.
Yeah.
And our circuit breakers, every electrician who came in the building said, "Oh, you want to get rid of that." And we have.
I just wanted to say one thing, which is that one thing I wanted to say went right through my brain, and I'm going to say it now instead, which is that if by any chance anybody here is interested in subscribing to our No Frack Gas and Mass monthly environmental news, we'll put the link to do that in the chat.
Can you put all the links that were in the presentation in the chat?
We can try if we can remember
I can
them
work
all.
on the websites for sure, and the No Frack Gas. No Frack Gas has another newsletter that comes out not on a regular basis. It's really an action newsletter, so it's whenever there's something to do. I try to publish it once a month. Sometimes it's a little more often. We'll get those both out there.
And Terry, I see your hand up.
I was just going to ask Jane, I know you've talked to me about this before, but I don't know if everybody's heard about this. I think the batteries that you're going to be using with your solar are not lithium, right? You did research on that, and I thought that was fascinating. Other people might be interested.
Our initial plan was to do glass pack batteries, which are non-toxic, easily recyclable, but there are so many different new battery possibilities that I'm not sure that's my favorite is that we will once again ask Form Energy whether their iron air batteries are actually available, especially for such a small nonprofit. We'll see. But yes, we would like to go with non-toxic and safe batteries, although I think lithium batteries, I've got one in my pocket right now in my phone.
But you're going to be pretty much off the grid
The
with
plan
this
is
whole setup.
we would still be connected to the grid so that if there was a power outage,
Okay,
we would be
back
able
up.
to island and you
Yeah.
could come get warm or cool, charge your phone, your laptop, your power tools. But during the rest of the year, if there's a peaking power event, we'd be able to actually supply electricity to the grid.
Nice, nice. Amazing
least that's the
research you
goal.
did.
Funny, I never meant to know so much about gas and electric systems. I wanted to know about wildlife. It just kind of happened.
Ties in.
Chelsea, I don't have a good eye on the chat. Are there questions from the chat that we should be paying attention to?
Yeah, so I'm kind of going through them right now. I'm not seeing any questions. If anyone put any in there and maybe I'm just missing it, please put it in there again, or you can unmute and just say it if you're comfortable doing that. But no, it's mostly people just having small conversations and putting links in.
I do like the question about what species we've got on our riverbank. And the answer is actually in the chat, but bur oak is one of my absolute favorites. So we've got bur oaks, shadbush, which blooms really, really early, and witch hazel, which blooms really, really late. American hazelnut, serviceberry, winterberry, all sorts of things, so that hopefully we will not put out bird feeders as much, because really that has all sorts of negative aspects to it. But boy, do I love seeing the birds and having all these fruit and nut bearing natural landscape should suffice.
Robin Kimmerer just put out a new book called Serviceberry. I listened to a part of it online, but yeah, I haven't gotten it yet.
Neat. She is another great author.
Big advocate for the birds and everything.
I think John and I have all the links you could possibly ever want to connect to everything we've talked to. They're peppered throughout the chat.
I have a simple question. It's Michelle. Are you looking for books for the library?
Can I let you know in a few days after we put everything we've got into the shelf?
Thank you.
So it was great. Dan Grant, who is one of our air quality monitors, put together the shelves for us, which were so dusty, and bless his heart, he cleaned them all. Wonderful. And then Sergio Del Molino actually secured them to the walls yesterday, as well as put up our new mailbox. So we may not have our sign back up, but we have the most awesome mailbox that actually holds all the stuff we get and has our logo on both sides. Thank you, Chelsea. It looks great. And today, for the first time in forever, when it was raining, our mail was dry. Oh, Susan, you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if I'm sorry, I had to step out for part of the talk. Are you guys following or anything to say about the Notch Forest situation in North Adams?
We have pretty much stayed out of that. There's a lot of work going on. For us to look into anything more, we were going to have to really do a bunch of research on it. And we are doing so much that we decided that we are not going to be involved in that one. We try to cover everything, but there comes a time where you just have to say, there are other people working on it. We're stepping back.
There are a few things that we assist with that we can't really take on ourselves too. Greylock Glen, there were some plans for a not very environmentally friendly set of cabins, and we helped get a group started to pose that and gave them a lot of advice on how to organize around that.
It's really frustrating having been part of trying to come up with a compromise for Greylock Glen, and now they're making changes to the compromise, which is frustrating.
So if no one has any other questions,
I have one last question, Chelsea, I think. This is Terry. And I didn't put my hand up, but I'm wondering if any of the funding you're getting, Jane, is, I know you do a lot of work on winning that funding, you know, putting in proposals, but is any of it coming from the Inflation Reduction Act at all, or any of the programs through that? Or have you looked into that at all to see if you can get?
For most of the Inflation Reduction Act funding that would come eventually to us, it went first to other larger organizations and then will hopefully trickle down to us. The good thing about that is it was dispersed and out to those other organizations so that it can't be somehow recalled.
Yeah, that's yeah.
We do
That's
have
the
an
key.
EPA grant. The Breathe Easy Berkshire is funded by an EPA grant, but we have a signed contract. We've been working diligently on it, and that should mean that that funding is secure for, I think we're through 2026 on that funding.
Okay.
So
Good.
And that originally came from the IRA funding as well.
I guess you're right.
Through EPA, yeah. That's why there's a strong focus on community health involved with it as well. And Jessica, I dropped a link to our page on battery information that's on the No Frack Gas and Mass. I saw your question. That's in the chat.
Ooh. I hadn't thought about the area near Roaring Brook Road as a good amphibian crossing area. That would sounds like a good one to check out.
I can't even picture where it is, but yeah.
I don't think Andrew came with me when we were exploring Mill Brook. It's right near there, right near where I want that culvert replaced.
All right, well, oh, Jane, were you about to?
No, I know, I'm just so excited, and thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Yeah, have a good evening.
Thank you very much. It was great.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming,
Bye.
folks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks.